Hello, y'all, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. My name is Andrew Velez. I'm here with my co-host, Joel Dehls. This is episode 10 of the Fantasy Reaction Show. We're here after Thursday Night Football with a game between the Bears and the Commanders. Amazing game. So excited to watch the Bears and the Commanders. However, I said that sarcastically before the game, but now here we are, and we just watched a ton of offense, a lot of good football, a lot of bad football at the same time. But Mr. Dehls, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. What a weird game because, like you said, Commanders Bears. You're not excited for it, and Thursday night games typically there's just not a lot of scoring. It's always lower scores, lower totals, and then you have Sam Howell and Justin Fields masterclass. Howell damn near 400 passing yards. Fields has 300 total yards. All these touchdown. DJ Moore going crazy. So I'm excited, man. This is a good game.
Justin Fields, the star of the show today, because last week we had him as our start of the week against the Broncos. He was phenomenal. This week against the Commanders, I don't think we were expecting the Bears to come out and absolutely lay the wood to the Commanders so early on. 27-3. It seems extremely one-sided. Justin Fields, 282 yards, 4 touchdowns, no turnovers. That's what you love to see. 11 rushes, 57 yards. He was damn near perfect today. I say damn near because there were a couple of throws in the second half where kind of underthrew Khalil, overthrew DJ Moore, which would have been his third touchdown at the time. But talk about DJ Moore. Oh my goodness gracious. This is going to be one of the highlight performances of the season. 8 receptions, 223 yards, 3 touchdowns. Honestly, I'm not even exaggerating. Could have been 5.
Yeah.
The overthrow, the one that they said that he was quote unquote out of bounds, which was extremely Mickey Mouse. And then, of course, the one where he inevitably did score right about the end of the game. Just an unbelievable game from the Bears. I don't know if I expected this amount of offense, but this was the Justin Fields that we've been waiting on. This was the Justin Fields and DJ Moore connection that we all anticipated coming into the season. Because what were all of our thoughts? Now you have a weapon. Now you have a guy that you can trust and rely on. There's no more excuses. And we were drilling Justin for the first 2-3 weeks of the season when he was incapable of showing us any type of progression as a passer. But these last 2 weeks to put on the performances that he has, particularly forget about just, let's not talk about real life, but fantasy football. This is the man you drafted. If you're in a 2-quarterback league, now you're not punching yourself not nearly as much if you decided to take him as that late first round pick or early second round pick. Justin Fields, back-to-back performances where I think in a combined 60 fantasy points, over 60 fantasy points in 2 weeks. Talk to me about your boy, Mr. Fields. I know that this was your potential dark horse quarterback
QB1.
one, right?
Yeah. I'm seeing the comments now. He's leading the league in touchdown passes, 11 touchdowns. How much shit can change in 2 weeks, right? Because those first
Crazy.
4 weeks, those first 3 weeks, it was ugly, man. 3 total passing touchdowns. He had more interceptions than passing touchdowns through 3 weeks of the season. You're sitting here, you're saying, is Justin Fields going to get benched? Is he going to be replaced? And listen, the verdict's not out, right? These 2 weeks don't tell you that he's the franchise quarterback, just like those first 3 weeks doesn't tell you that he's a bust and he's never going to be anything. It's great to see Justin Fields be able to win from the pocket. I think that was the biggest question mark coming into the season because we saw the athleticism second half of last year, the first few games of this season and really last season too, where they really wanted him to be just a pocket quarterback, took away so much from what he could do as a rusher. So last season, the second half, we saw he could be the most dynamic rushing quarterback in the league. And now coming into this year, we said, listen, Fields, we know you can do that. Now show us what you could do from the pocket. And these last 2 games have been magnificent. I mean, just beyond the numbers, but the fact that he had his first 300+ yard game last week, back-to-back games of 4+ passing touchdowns, and a couple of them guys were wide open, right? Like the first DJ Moore touchdown, or the second one maybe, where he was just wide open down the left side. Then he has another one on a rope in the back left corner of the end zone. There is just no room there, and he puts a dot to DJ Moore. So I'm excited, man. Like, this is the Fields that I knew the potential was there, right? Like even when you go back to the days at Ohio State, like him throwing for insane yardage in playoffs games and just showing like there's a reason why this guy should be in consideration for QB2 in this draft class. So I'm not sitting here ready to say that Fields has shown enough, and no matter what happens the rest of the year, he's the franchise guy. But for fantasy, because that's all we're talking about on today's show, for fantasy, QB3 last week with 29 points. Right now, obviously, two quarterbacks played, so QB1, but 33 fantasy points. I mean, what's scary about this is he's doing this without the rushing upside, right? Last week, 25 rushing yards. This week, 57. 57 rushing yards for any other quarterback except Fields and Lamar Jackson's a great day. But
Yep.
for Fields and Lamar Jackson, we know these guys can get 100
It's
plus
average.
any given.
That's average.
Exactly. So the game is going to come where Fields has 100 plus rushing yards, 250 passing, and 3 total touchdowns. Then we're going to see that 40 plus point performance. But for right now, if you're a Justin Fields manager, like you said, you draft him that late first, early second, these last 2 weeks, you got to be feeling over the moon.
Now I'm seeing a lot of comments asking us, where's Riv? I know we're talking about Riv's Chicago Bears. I tried my best to get him on the show. He's just not feeling the best. Send him some love in the chat. But you know that he's feeling different right now. Not just a Justin Fields virtuoso performance, but a DJ Moore virtuoso. I mean, he's through the moon right now. But again, we did try to get him up here. But the matchups that Justin Fields has these next few weeks, now we might start to see the Justin Fields that we were anticipating. Minnesota next week, Las Vegas, Chargers, New Orleans, Carolina, Detroit, Minnesota again, and then he hits his bye week. Those are some unbelievably great matchups. I know you hear the names like New Orleans or maybe even a Detroit secondary, where their rush defense is great. Their secondary has been very forgiving. These are a bunch of matchups, every single one that I listed here, that he can exploit, and he can have himself a great game. Maybe Carolina, because sneakily they've done a good job of limiting the quarterback to points because of how much they give up on the ground. But Justin Fields, if you weren't able to acquire him last week, I think it's going to be overly difficult to get him now, because you're finally now reaping the rewards of trusting a Justin Fields. Now, very briefly, we could talk about a couple things. We could talk about the wide receiver position on both sides. Now, I already highlighted DJ Moore, and I was going crazy on Twitter. I have him in one of my biggest leagues, 55 fantasy points. Of course, I play with bonuses. It's a little bit different. I play in half-point PPR. But what a performance he had. Yards after the catch. He has been overly special this season when it comes to that regard. And that's what I was big on coming into the season also. He showed that in the preseason, where his yards after the catch was what was impressing me. It's been on full display, especially tonight against the Commanders, where he was just forcing missed tackles left and right, being able to extend plays, being able to continue to push the ball down the field, and of course, get into the end zone multiple times. DJ Moore, I mean, we're talking about one of the more trustworthy, in my opinion, wide receiver ones. Even with Fields struggling, he's been able to put up 100-yard games. He's been able to get into the end zone. And now we finally saw the blow-up performance from a DJ Moore. I feel overly comfortable with him. Now on the opposing side, I don't know if you can trust anyone, because Sam Howell threw for 388 yards, the most empty 388 yards. But in fantasy football, you'll absolutely take that, 27 fantasy points. He's going to be one of the highest finishes of the week. But when it comes to the receivers, you're expecting Terry with 388 yards, that Terry goes and has himself a blow-up game, that my guy, breakout player of the year, that's looking like a horrendous take, Jahan Dotson, would get some love, more than 30 receiving yards. No, but it's guys like Curtis Samuel that's getting into the end zone, 65 yards on 6 catches, 7 receptions. And Logan Thomas, who we were talking before the show, it's pretty obvious that this is his favorite target. 11 targets. He was able to bring in 77 yards and did get into the end zone as well. I'm honestly disappointed, because Terry and Jahan are there's just such a skill difference between them and the rest of the guys. And it's not like Terry's not getting open. It's not like Jahan's getting open. Prime example, Jahan Dotson gets a ball thrown to him on the sideline. Sam Howell, I see him do the pat-pat. As soon as I saw him do the pat-pat on the ball, I got a little bit worried. He throws it to the sideline. It's out of bounds. But what does Jahan do? Doesn't go and just catch it regularly. Goes with the one-hand snag. Do you know how bitter I was,
That
Joel?
hurt.
Do you know how bitter I was? They just
Nah, that was
cannot
tough.
get on the same page. So what is it? Am I alone here? Are you just fading any Washington receiver because simply there's just such a low floor with these guys?
You probably have to keep Terry. I'm still fine starting Terry each week, even though you're not looking forward to it, right? Last week, week 4 was his best, 10 targets, 8 receptions for 86. But the first 3 weeks of the season, wide receiver 70, wide receiver 26, wide receiver 47. This week, he'll probably end up being around wide receiver 40 or 50 again with 9 points. So Terry's someone that where you drafted him, it's impossible to cut him. And
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going out of their way to trade for Terry McLaurin unless you have a diehard Commanders fan in your league. So he's probably someone you're looking at as like a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, someone you probably want to bench going forward. And Jahan Dotson, he's cuttable. I mean, I don't think we can hold on much longer. We're 5 weeks into the season. He's yet to top wide receiver 28. He has one game of more than 4 receptions. It's not happening. It sucks because the talent is there. We saw it last year, especially being able to get into the end zone. But Sam Howell just threw for damn near 400 yards. He's probably not going to have this many yards again in a single game. If Jahan Dotson's not able to get involved with Sam Howell having arguably the game of the year so far for him, I don't know if he's ever going to get involved. If Curtis Samuel is consistently outplaying him or outproducing him, I should say, if Logan Thomas, who week 1 when he was healthy got a ton of looks, this past week when he was healthy, got a ton of looks. He had the concussion. He came back those 2 games. He wasn't great, but it seems like Logan Thomas, he favors over him. And Terry McLaurin is still the best player on this team, the best receiver on this team. So right now for Jahan Dotson, if you cut him, someone's going to go pick him up, and you might feel bad about it, but you got to hope you go up against Jahan Dotson because I'm not worried about him if I'm facing him. Go like, I mean, it probably sucks to cut him because you drafted him in the 8th, 9th, maybe 10th round if you drafted earlier in the year. But right now, he's probably just clogging up a roster spot.
I can tell you that he is clogging up a roster spot, and I felt good. The matchup was there. He's playing Chicago. I even asked you guys before the show, I'm talking about you and Joel. I said, I'm torn between Michael Thomas and Jahan. The matchup's amazing. I don't know what to do. Why did I listen to Joel? That should have been mistake number 1 for me.
The one other player I want to mention is Khalil Herbert because it does seem like he got injured. He came back in. I don't know why he tried coming back in because it was a nasty injury. It didn't seem like anything broke or anything like that, but maybe an ankle sprain or something. It feels we're just threw it in front of him that you're probably looking at a 50-yard touchdown, but he just threw it behind him. He tried to reach back. But Khalil Herbert these last 2 weeks has looked nothing short of amazing, right? Against the Broncos, maybe you take it with a grain of salt because you're the worst rush defense in the league, worst defense in the league. That's all I'll say.
Go to hell. Go to hell.
But this game, he looked phenomenal. The Commanders' defense is at least respectable. He was breaking tackles. He was carrying guys. And Roschon Johnson, especially after the first couple of weeks, you got reports from guys like Jake Laser saying, eventually this will be Roschon's backfield. Eventually he'll take majority of snaps. And I still think in the long term, it's Roschon's backfield. And with this injury, he has a chance to take over, but he got concussed too. And what we've seen this entire season, if you get a concussion, you are guaranteed to miss at least 1 week. So if Khalil Herbert is out next week and Roschon Johnson is out next week, I mean, Deontay Foreman, we're thinking way ahead now, but Deontay Foreman is someone you could probably pick up off waiver wires if you're in desperate need of a start. But Khalil Herbert these last 2 weeks, this was the running back we were drafting in the 9th round, 8th round, that this could be the breakout guy. Unfortunately, due to the injury and also due to Roschon Johnson's injury, we're really not going to be able to see either of those guys, be able to pick up a workhorse load going forward. So Deontay Foreman, at least for 1 week, is probably going to be the starting running back for the Bears.
Now, the only other position to catch a pass from Justin Fields today was the tight end position. Cole Kmet was able to bring in 42 yards and a touchdown, and Robert Tonyan was able to grab 2 balls and 10 yards. Other than that, DJ Moore, Robert Tonyan, Cole Kmet, nobody else caught a ball. Nobody else produced on this offense. That's just how crazy locked in Justin Fields was.
No love for Mooney, man.
DJ Moore. No, Mooney got 4 targets, wasn't able to bring in a catch. But Cole Kmet, another one that I just love the tight end position. I don't know, because it's just so ugly right now.
It is
Such
very
a
ugly.
crapshoot. I feel like that's where the big brains really come in. But Cole Kmet was one of those guys that I believed in that talent. I believed that Justin Fields was with DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, third option, Mapletron. Of course, he's not going to be with the team. And then Cole Kmet, who is not bad by any means last season. He was able to get into the end zone a good amount of times. And of course, we saw it back-to-back weeks where last week against the Broncos got into the end zone twice, and this week gets into the end zone once again. I feel like Cole Kmet is one of those as well, with how bad the tight end position is. If you do have Cole Kmet, he needs to be in your lineup week to week. But that's going to do it for talking about Justin Fields, the Bears, and the Commanders. And with that being said, we're going to bring our guy, Adam, from FTN Fantasy. Adam, thank you very much. He was a part of the show a couple weeks back when we did our starts of the week. Of course, we had to have him back on, and I'm going to have to eat a slice of humble pie as I see him wearing his Buffalo Bills uniform.
Last week was fun. Let's do that again.
And I bet it was fun for you, of course. But hey, I'm not a hater. I'm an acknowledgement. I'm an acknowledger of great football. And Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills played excellent football. But talk to me, Adam. How are you doing tonight?
I'm all right. Me and Dehls pretty under the weather, so it's that time of year. But yeah, I mean, DJ Moore also on one of my most important teams, so that was fun. And yeah, I mean, other than that, it's just the same old grind, just doing a bunch of content every week and hoping that, you know, all my fantasy teams do as well as they can, which tonight off to a pretty good start. I can't complain.
You were talking about it. DJ Moore goes crazy. Unfortunately, no Justin Fields in your lineup, but silver lining, you can look forward to Anthony Richardson playing football this week.
That's what I'm saying. Like I felt like I couldn't bench Richardson. He's been too good. But yeah, I mean, now I have, you know, Fields who I didn't lose confidence in the first place, but somebody is looking for a quarterback. So, you know, if Joe Burrow struggles again this week, somebody might be really upset. So I got some potential trade pieces. And yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't love having him on my bench, but you know, I feel like you can't bench Richardson at this point.
No,
so.
you live with it especially with the matchup of Tennessee Titans. It should be an amazing matchup for Richardson. But let's get into our starts of the week. Unless you want to take a victory lap about the Buffalo Bills.
I mean, look, they're 3-1. They should be 4-0. But like, I've been a Bills fan my entire life. I'm 30. I've been a Bills fan my entire life. I still remember like the exact everything about the 13-second loss. So like, until the clock hits 0 and the Bills actually win a Super Bowl, there's nothing for me to victory lap because they weren't supposed to beat Miami by 28. I mean, that was a little unexpected. But like, when the Bills are playing and Josh Allen's playing football like that, I think they're as good as anybody in the league. So we'll see if they can keep it up. They got a tough situation. They have to go. They lost a home game. Technically, they're the home team on Sunday, but they have to go to London when Jacksonville's already been there a week. I think that's kind of lame, but we'll see what happens. And Vaughn might be back, which would be amazing.
That's true. Yeah, he traveled to London, I saw.
Yeah, he wants to play. I think the Bills, it's going to be tough because Rousseau is questionable. I feel like if Rousseau was active, they'd just be like, all right, we'll sit Vaughn one more week. But, you know, after losing Trey, which...
That's really what it is.
So I was going to be on the stream with you guys on Monday. I had my Trey jersey on the entire day. He's one of my favorite 3 players on the team. The first player that they drafted in the McDermott era, and that quick, as soon as I saw that happen, it like took away from the entire win for me personally. Like it's and like it's cliche, right? Everybody always says like he's the first guy in, last guy out, but like legitimately Trey White, like everybody on the team said it, McDermott, everybody, like nobody works harder than him. And it sucks on top of the fact that he just got hurt. Yeah. But he was like last year he wasn't himself, right? Coming back from the ACL. He was just starting to come into form again as not a top 5 DB, but back to being a top 10 guy in my opinion.
Still great.
Yeah, like, and now it's just like this, like, and as soon as he threw the helmet, you knew it was bad. So shout out Trey White. You know, I believe in the depth we have, but it, like you can't replace him as, you know, a player, a leader, everything.
You said it perfectly right there. And we hope the best for Trey White. Hopefully it's a speedy recovery. We know players of his caliber, they're built different. He's going to be back on the field, and he's going to be back better than ever. But let's get into these starts of the week, sits of the week. We're going to start at the quarterback position. Adam, we'll start with you because we didn't do the courtesy of giving you our players in advance. So we'll give you some leeway there. So if you could start with your quarterback start of the week, we would appreciate that.
So I'm gonna go under the assumption that Dehls wants to talk about Zach Wilson. So I'm not going to bring up Zach Wilson. But if he does want to talk about Zach Wilson, I'll just say I agree, and I'm scared. I'm gonna go Matthew Stafford though. I think
love it.
Stafford's had these weird games where it's been if you are looking for one touchdown pass from Stafford, he's your guy every single week. He happens to get one, and then Kyren Williams does this touchdown, magic trick like he does every week. But that's going to slow down, and it might slow down this week against, just like the Titans, like the premier pass funnel defense in the NFL, in the Eagles. So far this season, you look at the Eagles, their secondary has not played well, right? They've had some injuries in the back end, but like Slay hasn't been as good, and 80.5% of the yardage against the Eagles has come through the air. It's the highest rate in the NFL. You get Cooper Kupp back, presumably. So now you have Kupp, you have Puka. Tutu's been really good. Now he's thrust into more of a number 3 role, which is really, really exciting for that team. Rams are home underdogs here. And look at the Eagles. I mean, one hiccup where they were allowed the QB 25 to Baker. But other than that, they've allowed the QB 2 to Mac Jones, the QB 2 to Kirk Cousins, and then last week the QB 13 to Sam Howell. They're also allowing a 5.5% passing touchdown rate, bottom 5 in the league. So, for me, volume, the touchdowns haven't been there, but if you just watch him play, I mean, there probably haven't been 6-7 quarterbacks that have played better than Matthew Stafford this season, and now he gets Cooper Kupp back. So, yeah, if you are, if you were starting Geno, if you were starting Herbert, or if you have been, worried about Joe Burrow, Stafford's somebody you should try to pick up and start pretty comfortably and confidently this week.
I'm with you. Matt Stafford was going to be my start of the week, too.
Damn.
Yeah, no. Listen, you mentioned Zach Wilson. I'm going to be talking about a Jet start of the week later in the show, but I need to see at least 2 weeks with Zach before I could go and come up here and say start Zach Wilson. I do want to pivot, though, because Matt Stafford, I think it's a great start. Mac Jones was great week 1 against Philly. Kirk was insane week 2. 3 of the 4 weeks, Stafford has thrown for 300-plus yards. Now he's getting Cooper Kupp back. I mean, this is the best in terms of secondaries. This is the secondary you want to go up against. Shout out to Chelsea.
That's hilarious.
There is another name I want to bring up that's terrifying. It's scary. I don't even want to mention it. But Saquon Barkley is expected back. If Saquon Barkley is expected back and the New York Giants going up against the Miami Dolphins defense, you could do worse than Daniel Jones at the quarterback position. I don't feel good about it. He only has one great week this year, but that one great week against Arizona, let me double check. I believe he was QB1 that week.
I think he was.
So we know the upside to Daniel Jones with his rushing ability. He was QB1 the week, 31 points, 300 total yards, 3 total touchdowns. This is a game the Giants are going to be losing. They're going to be losing a lot of games. They're going to have to throw to get back into this game. If Saquon or Andrew Thomas, at least one of them are back, and Saquon has practiced these last 2 days, Andrew Thomas has not. So it sounds like Saquon is trending towards playing. I'm okay starting Daniel Jones this week.
Listen, that actually warms my heart, Joel. It seems as if all the doubters, all the naysayers, they're coming out the woodwork.
That's just for fantasy. I can't say what he's going to look like.
They're destroying Daniel Jones's name. It doesn't sit right with my spirit. But I love those plays. My start of the week is going to be Mr. Jordan Love. Right now, quarterback 3 on the season. He's had finishes of quarterback 3, quarterback 6, quarterback 12. Against Atlanta, where he was quarterback 16, was still able to put up 20 fantasy points. Going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, who have been extremely generous to quarterbacks this season, one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. Jordan Love has been a model of consistency so far in fantasy football, and he's had a rushing touchdown in the last 2 games as well. So he showed that ability to at least get out of the pocket and scramble if need be. and it's resulted in some big points. I love this matchup for Jordan Love. I look for him to continue to be one of the more dominant fantasy football players. And again, you have to take opinions away from real football to fantasy football. And where I may not be the biggest Jordan Love fan in regular football and fantasy football, he's proven to be nothing short of amazing so far. I'll get it going with the quarterback sit of the week. Now, it's not a name that I'm going to love to say personally, because I want him to have quarterback one type numbers going up against the New York Jets, and that's Mr. Russell Wilson. Now, the issue with Russell Wilson and why I have him as my quarterback sit is because the Jets defense has been unbelievable in terms of stopping the quarterback. When it comes to fantasy football, they've had no quarterbacks finish higher than quarterback 16, and I believe that was Mac Jones, because Mac Jones did have that big play touchdown. But Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Mac Jones, I mean, they've played some serious talent, and Dak Prescott as well, who was super efficient in real life, but in fantasy football finished as the quarterback 18. So it goes to show you how great this defense is. And as great as Russell Wilson and the Broncos offense has been, particularly in fantasy football, I struggle to have confidence with Russ going up against this Jets defense.
He was mine, so I agree.
Oh, good. I was gonna say, because I feel like Adam was gonna steal mine. Mine's Trevor Lawrence going up against the Buffalo Bills. I was like, I know he's the Bills guy here. Listen, the Bills defense, nobody has been better in terms of opposing fantasy quarterbacks. They're allowing seven points per game to opposing fantasy quarterbacks. They held the Red Hot Dolphins to just 20 points last week. Sam Howell threw 4 interceptions. The Raiders and Jimmy G scored 10 total points. The Bills defense, which, you know, when we're talking on pick a side and we're talking about football and analyzing football to the game, not just fantasy, last year we're looking at the Bills defense like the end of season numbers look good, but we don't really trust them. They go into Cincinnati and they get blown out.
Come on, bro.
But
Chill.
this year,
it's a fantasy show.
This year they've been up there with the Niners. They've been up with the Cowboys. They have been one of the elites of the elite defenses. And so far this season, Trevor Lawrence has been disappointing. Week 1 was his best week. He finished as a top 10 quarterback, but he only scored 17 points. These last 3 weeks, QB 32, QB 19, QB 16. In 2 quarterback leagues, of course, you start Trevor Lawrence, but in a 1 quarterback league, I would look to pivot.
I think it's interesting, too, because I think Trevor Lawrence has actually played really well this year. He's just been absolutely screwed over by drops. The problem with Jacksonville is they cannot get third down conversions. I'm not like excited to start him, but if they're without Rousseau and Vaughn gets one more week off, all of a sudden that pass rush is not as deep, and add to the fact that Trey White is obviously out. But yeah, like Buffalo's defense, I know the competition prior to last week wasn't anything crazy, but this is, again, I've been watching this team my entire life. This is easily the deepest defensive line they've had since Josh Allen's been in the league. And I don't even know how, like, it's insanely deep. So, like, I think what's going to help them in the absence of Trey White is the pass rush, but I don't know if it's going to be as bad this week if Rousseau doesn't play, and obviously if Vaughn doesn't play. But also, like, I feel like this offense for Jacksonville is also like they're on the precipice of having a blow up game. They've been too close.
But even still, the matchup last week against the Falcons would have been one for me, where I know the Falcons defense isn't bad, but Calvin Ridley, outside of the touchdown, that really saved his fantasy day. Christian Kirk has been a model of consistency for them. I'll give him that benefit of the doubt. You had Travis Etienne. He's been solid. It's just there's been a lack of explosiveness. And I'm not here blaming Trevor. I know that the team has struggled with drops, and Joel has mentioned it from multiple times, I should say, that they've been kind of just inches away sometimes, where Calvin Ridley had 2 touchdowns where his foot was just out of bounds. But again, you still have to trust what your eyes are telling you. Understand that you trust the talent that is Trevor Lawrence. You know that Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk are going to be valuable options, and it's inevitable that these guys get it going and get it rolling. So, Joel, do you want to start off the running back start of the week? Go ahead, get it going.
I told you I'm gonna mention a Jet. The time is now, man. Salah's saying it. I'm saying it. Breece Hall. This is the week we see the breakout week for Breece Hall. Listen, it's been a bit of an up and down ride with Breece. Week 1, he goes out 10 for 127. Drew and I, we come on Fantasy Reaction and be like, must start going forward. Brees is an RB2 at a minimum with top 5 upside for the rest of the year.
What a day
And
that
what's he do
was.
week 2?
What a
4
day that
carries for
was.
9 yards. Week 3, 12 carries for 18 yards. And we're sitting here like, oh my God, bro, what happened? But then week 4 against Kansas City, 6 carries for 56 yards. And when you look at the raw box score, you could say, oh, Brees has been inconsistent. He's not 100% back from the ACL injury. When you're watching him play, he looks like 85% of Brees Hall did last year, right? I don't think he's 100% back, but he's pretty close. And as the weeks go on, he gets closer and closer. And Robert Saleh being able to go out there in the press conference and say the training wheels are off, it's 100%.
Yeah,
he is the guy
lit.
now, because Dalvin Cook has been terrible. He's been the worst running back in the NFL. He is just so inefficient. He can't break tackles. He's not fast anymore. Michael Carter should be getting snaps over him. But I think the biggest difference between what we saw week 4 and what we saw weeks 2 and 3 was weeks 2 and 3, Nathaniel Hackett and the Jets were just terrified of Zach Wilson screwing everything up. They were terrified of putting Zach in situations where he has to throw the ball more than 25 times per game. And week 4, they go down 17-0 in the blink of an eye, and they said, listen, there's only one way we come back into this game. Zach Wilson has to do something. And Zach looked good. So on 1st and 2nd down, instead of having 8 or 9 guys in the box trying to stop the run, the Jets said, let's pass the ball. They saw success passing, and off of that, Brees Hall was able to have a great game, at least an efficient game, even though he only got 6 carries. Now he's going up against the worst defense in the NFL, the worst rushing defense in the NFL. Even take away those 350 yards against Miami. They allowed 170 rushing to the Bears, 122 to the Commanders. I don't have to tell you how bad the Broncos defense is. Brees Hall, one of the most talented backs in the NFL. All the efficiency numbers are off the charts. When you're watching him, you see that he is an elite back. He's not all the way back, but still an elite back. This week, Brees Hall, RB1.
You're going to make me pull up. You keep disrespecting us the way that you've been.
Well,
don't think I don't know that it's rivalry week.
Dehls, you forgot to add that the last 4 running backs that faced the Broncos have finished as their running back 8, running back 1, running back 2, and running back 1 in fantasy.
Maybe this is Dalvin Cook's coming out party. If it was any week, it's this week.
Michael Carter's still playing on 3rd downs a lot. So.
I hope and pray. that Brees does this. I hope so.
I was going to say, you should.
Brees. That being said, it won't matter when we still come away with the W. We're a fantasy football show, so I'll keep the real football out of it. But we know it's rivalry week. I've been having an issue all day saying rivalry week. I don't know why. But Jets versus Broncos, that's prime time. I don't care how average the two teams are. It's personal.
I forgot about that. You know, Hackett wants to be calling up some good shit in this game.
I was going to say, you saw he was saying that Sean Payton never reached out to him. But I don't blame him for that. But I love that start of the week. He was going to be my start of the week, but of course I understand allowing you to.
Well, Drew puts 4 starts of the week in the doc we have.
You should be saying thank you. You should be saying thank you. Hey, bud. Here's some options for you to go through, and maybe you like one of them. If you like one of them, let me know. Going over one of my starts of the week actually is going to be David Montgomery versus Carolina. Now, last week we were here having conversations about David Montgomery versus Jahmyr Gibbs. And hey, maybe this could be Jahmyr Gibbs' breakout game because Carolina has just allowed running backs to go crazy on them. 2 touchdowns. Didn't allow a touchdown to Minnesota, but allowed them to rush for 135 yards. They essentially allow running backs to do whatever the hell they want. And David Montgomery has been the workhorse running back for the Detroit Lions. We saw him get injured versus the I believe it was the Falcons. That didn't matter. He comes back the very next week, and they still. Oh, was it the Falcons? No, it was against Seattle, I believe. And then comes back against the Packers, has over 32 carries, and he was one of the best running backs on the week. So I expect very, very wholeheartedly that David Montgomery comes up here and is one of our starts of the week and one of the best finishes on the week.
Yeah, that was mine. So we'll pivot. And the other thing, too, with the Lions, they are running the ball like 75% of the time in the red zone. Like, they have no other play. And this is a game where, like, they're massive favorites. Amon-Ra is a little bit banged up. Jameson Williams should be limited. This should be another 25 carry game, honestly, from Montgomery. I'm gonna go with. I was debating between two players, but I'm gonna go with somebody that to start the season there was no debate about whether you start him or not. Was actually more productive in a tough matchup than I thought last week. But let's go to Joe Mixon here. I do worry about the overall efficiency with this offense. The Bengals are dead last in points per drive. They're averaging less than a point per drive. This is an interesting spot. We'll get these reports probably every week that, Joe Burrow looks a little bit better and moving a little bit better. But if they have success in this game, it might be from Joe Mixon. T. Higgins probably doesn't play. Arizona plays a massive amount of zone defense, and they don't blitz. So if there's a spot where Burrow can be more comfortable than he has been, it would be this spot. And Arizona, I mean, they are terrible against the run so far this season. Only the Bears and Broncos are allowing more fantasy points per game to running backs. They've actually allowed the most rushing touchdowns this season with 7, tied with the Broncos. And Mixon still got that massive workload, 75% of the snaps, 81% of the team's rushing attempts. Efficiency has been great, but I feel like this is the best spot that the Bengals have been in for their offense. Granted, you can make the case Tennessee's pass defense is terrible last week, but their pass rush is a problem. Arizona they don't generate pressure. They're bottom 5 in pressure rate. They're bottom 5 in blitz rate, and they play zone a ton, which is perfect for this Jamar Chase all of a sudden kind of slot receiver role, and it's good for Joe Mixon to get receptions, against zone coverage, and hopefully the Bengals can we get 21 points as a team? Can we get that?
No.
I'm begging. Something,
not happening.
Joe Burrow. Please.
The funny thing is, for over at FTN, we do kind of game picks for each week. Take this with a grain of salt because I'm in dead last, but I picked Arizona to win.
So that's also my upset of the week. The Cardinals beating the Bengals. They've just looked so terrible, and Cardinals have been a
Josh Dobbs is the QB6 over the last 3 weeks. It's insane.
Yeah, that was upsetting because he was a free agent in one of my big money leagues, and I wasn't able.
He's on my bench in my 2 quarterback dynasty league. The problem is I have Josh and Tua, so he won't be playing anytime soon.
See, so you're a Tua guy.
I like Tua, just not when he's playing the Bills.
I respect that. As a Bills fan, I'm shocked to hear that, but I shouldn't be surprised because ball. I'm gonna get into my sit of the week, and I apologize if one of you guys have this guy, but it's gonna be Alexander Mattison, and I instilled some confidence in him last week going up against Carolina. He almost had 100 rushing on 20 attempts, 93 rushing yards, wasn't able to get into the end zone. But going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown this season, it has been rough sledding if you have been going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw Jacksonville where ETN was not able to be as effective. We saw Breece Hall where he was able to break that big run, but outside that big run, they really weren't able to get anything going. Chicago, we understand that they completely shut down Chicago, both Justin Fields, Herbert, Roshan Johnson. It did not matter. They allowed less than 70 rushing yards to one of the better rushing units in national football. So Alexander Mattison, I still believe that he is the running back that Minnesota will use going on. Cam Akers did look solid last week against Carolina, but it is Carolina. You use that and take that with a grain of salt. But all in all, going up against the Chiefs, never a great matchup for a running back.
I'll go here from my side of the week. Ramondre Stevenson. Super high on him coming into the year, right? He was RB7 last year in PPR. And when you were looking at the Patriots backfield before they signed Zeke, and honestly after they signed Zeke, I wasn't moved a ton. I was saying, this is Ramondre's backfield. What other running back is going to get touches? And I was right. No other running back is getting a ton of touches. The usage for Ramondre, 18 touches, 20 touches, 16 touches. I mean, this is elite usage that Ramondre Stevenson is getting. Unfortunately, the production hasn't matched the usage. He's yet to top 60 rushing yards in a game. His best week was RB17, which was the only week he scored a touchdown. So Ramondre is out here getting the work, getting the carries on a bad offense. On an offense with Mac Jones, on an offense that doesn't produce big plays, so they're not in the red zone constantly. And now he's going up against New Orleans Saints, who's allowed the 6th fewest points to fantasy running backs. On top of that, the over-under for this game is 39.5, which is the second lowest of the week. So you have an inefficient running back on a bad offense going up a great defense with the low over-under. Ramondre Stevenson, we're going to mention it. I'm sure Drew feels the same way about Madison. There's only so many running backs that get this type of usage. So he's probably going to have to be in your lineup unless you were one of those lucky guys that were able to pick up a Kyron Williams, or a Devon Chan. Then maybe you have the opportunity to put them in your RB2 spot. But Ramondre has been disappointing this year, and I think he'll continue to disappoint in week 5.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Detroit game. I do not feel good about Miles Sanders. So last week, in the preseason, he had a groin injury, and it kept him out of practice for a little bit. Apparently was fine to start the year, but was on the injury report coming into last week with the injury, and he didn't practice on Friday. They still said they expect him to play. Then he ended up being limited to a bit. Season low 43% of the snaps, season low 46% of the rushing attempts. Once again, inefficient. He's averaging 3.5 yards per touch. It's like outside the top 35 running backs. It's been really bad. And people are finally starting to catch on to this Detroit run defense. This Detroit run defense has been borderline elite since the second half of last season. It's not just this season. And then this season, obviously, they've been. We always talk about the Titans as this team that just stops the run and forces you to pass. The Eagles. The Lions have been right there, too. I mean, they have been like 77% of the yardage against him has come via the pass. The only thing that would probably save Miles Sanders is the fact that he's still 4th among all running backs in targets, and he has a 15.3% target share. Actually, he's 2nd among running backs in total targets. And Bryce Young, keep in mind, has missed a game, and he's still 3rd among all quarterbacks with 27 checkdowns. Like, there's just no explosiveness in this passing game. And I don't know if you saw the interview with Frank Reich that he said, like, he had to call a timeout because he called a design play for Adam Thielen and didn't realize Thielen wasn't even on the field. Like, that's where we're at with this offense.
Oh, my Lord, have mercy.
God bless.
Yeah, like, not only are we designing our offense through 33-year-old Adam Thielen, but then we have to call timeouts not realizing he's not on the field. So that's the only thing that will save Miles Sanders is a bunch of checkdowns. They are huge underdogs, but, yeah, if he doesn't get, like, a full practice in by Friday, I think Chuba Hubbard gets, close to the same amount of work, and limited work against this run defense on an offense that's already inefficient is pretty bad.
All right, Joel, you can get us going with your wide receiver start of the week.
I'm excited for this one. Zay Flowers going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's been a bit of an up and down, first month for Zay because week 1, 10 targets, 9 receptions for 80 yards, wide receiver 17. And we're sitting here thinking, like, is he going to be the best rookie receiver, right? There was all this hype for JSN and Quentin Johnson and all of these guys. And then weeks 2 through 4, he never topped 60 yards. His best finish was wide receiver 35, and everyone kind of pumps the brakes saying, all right, Zay Flowers, great week 1, but maybe he's not a dependable starter going forward. But this week he goes up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Last week, Nico Collins, 7 receptions for 170 yards. The week before, Devontae Adams goes 13 for 170 and 2. The week before, Amari Cooper, 7 for 90 on one ankle, remind you. And then Brandon Ayuk, week 1, goes 8 for 129 and 2 touchdowns. The Steelers have been the dream matchup for opposing teams' wide receiver ones. And Mark Andrews, we know, is number 1 target on this team. But Zay Flowers is going to be the number 1 receiving option. He's going to be the one lined up outside. He'll line up in the slot too. We know he has the big playability, but we also know he's able to beat corners in the short and intermediate route. He can make guys miss in the screen game. So the Steelers have not proven whether it's, the top of the line receiver like Devontae Adams or a guy like Nico Collins, who, credit to him, has shown out this year and has really broken out. It doesn't matter who goes up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you're the wide receiver 1, you're going to have a top 10 finish.
Go ahead, Adam. You can get yours off.
Yeah, Flowers was definitely on my list. I like that call. I'm gonna go DeAndre Hopkins. I'm a little worried because he's been also on the injury report the last couple weeks with the ankle, and even though he fully expects to play every week and does, he's been limited the last 2 games. He was like under 70% of the routes last week. Had an okay game, almost scored a touchdown, but just like similar almost to the Steelers. The Colts just cannot defend wide receivers right now. And like they play this soft zone defense and they just kind of allow a ton of receptions to everybody they face. So you look at the wide receivers they faced, right? They've allowed, I think, 5 wide receivers to finish as top 20 fantasy wide receivers already this season. It was in week 1, it was Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones. In week 2, it was Collins and Tank Dell. Last week they played Puka Nacua. Like they've been getting destroyed by wide receivers. And Hopkins, like the overall metrics, like on the surface, don't look great, but he's still dominating targets right now. He's at like a 30% target share. Treylon Burks probably misses this game again, it looks like. So if he can get, and the Colts, the other thing about the Colts too that I love that we need to talk about more for fantasy, they are quietly like the best team to target against for fantasy in terms of game environment because they play at the fastest pace in the NFL. They lead the NFL in plays per second or seconds per play, I mean, and no huddle rate. So they're, it's a pace up spot. The Titans rank 31st in pace, so this is a massive pace up spot for the Titans offense. And they just don't have the secondary. I think Hopkins can get easily 80 yards and a touchdown this game. And as long as the game is close enough to where Derrick Henry just doesn't dominate, I think Hopkins has his best game, and hopefully he's fully off the injury report.
Hopkins is always going to be a risky play just because how poor that offensive line is for Tennessee. Tannehill really doesn't have the time to get the ball.
They might get
down the
Skoronski
field,
back this week, though,
which would be enormous. But of course, you trust the talent that is D-Hop, and this is a great matchup for him. If not this one, then when? But I can respect and appreciate the confidence in D-Hop. Obviously, he's shown to be one of the best in the game. But for me, I'm going with Puka Nacua. Now, he should be an obvious play for everyone. But I have him as my start of the week with the mindset that Cooper Kupp was a full participant in practice today. It's seeming as if Cooper Kupp will be back into the lineup, and automatically people are going to panic. Is Cooper Kupp going to get a majority of the targets? Is that going to take away from Puka's opportunities? We have already seen an offense where Puka and Tutu Atwell, they're both able to have success. Now, we understand Tutu Atwell is going to drop to the wide receiver 3. Puka's going to go and enter back into Tutu's old role, and Cooper Kupp's going to be Cooper Kupp. You can expect him to be great. But up against Philadelphia, where they've given up multiple touchdowns 2 times this season to the wide receiver, given up touchdowns to the wide receiver in consecutive weeks to Tampa Bay and Washington, wide receivers have been able to feast on this team. Right now, opponents rank, the Eagles are giving up 27th. They rank 27th in terms of giving up points to wide receivers. Their average right now is 40 fantasy points per game against wide receivers. The league average is 29.5. There's a reason why Adam had Matthew Stafford as his start of the week, and there's a reason why I have Puka Nacua, because Cooper Kupp, if he plays, that's an obvious play. But trust what you've seen in Puka so far. He's one of the league leaders in targets, one of the league leaders in receptions. He's been one of the league leaders in yards as well. He's been a stud. Don't fade him just because one of the best in the game, Cooper Kupp, is now returning. Stafford has proven that he can feed multiple mouths in an offense and still be fantasy relevant. Okay, I can get into the sit of the week. Excuse me, no worries. And that's going to be Calvin Ridley against Buffalo. So one of you, I think it was Joel, had Trevor Lawrence as his sit of the week versus Buffalo. Buffalo has been unreal defensively to start this season, and Calvin Ridley really hasn't been all too great. And last week, I said it earlier, he had his fantasy day saved by a touchdown where I believe he was able to just squeak out 10 double-digit fantasy points. But this is a matchup where we've seen Buffalo completely shut down teams, where they faced the Commanders with Terry and Jahan, where obviously we're not looking at those guys as trustworthy options, but still talented players, shut them down. Was able to limit both Tyreek and Waddle. They were able to essentially be almost, for what they're supposed to be, non-factors. Against the Jets, you don't trust anyone really. But Garrett Wilson was able to get into the end zone, but that was Garrett Wilson making a freak play. Calvin Ridley hasn't shown that he is the true alpha wide receiver 1 in this team. And I get it, you don't have Trey White. He is going to be a huge loss for this Buffalo Bills. But like Adam talked about already, the depth that is on this Buffalo team, the scheme that they play, it should still bode well in a great matchup for the Buffalo Bills. And there's just too much inconsistency right now with Calvin Ridley and his play. So with the matchup mostly being at the forefront, I'm sitting Calvin Ridley.
You have Calvin Ridley. I have Trevor Lawrence. You have Russell Wilson. I have Cortland Sutton as my wide receiver sit of the week. I was debating between Sutton and Judy, but when I looked to see where they're lining up, Sutton for the majority of the time is lining up on the outside, about 70% of his snaps on the outside. Jerry Judy's playing primarily the slot role. He's playing about 30% of his snaps out wide. and about 70 in the slot. So that means Courtland Sutton's going to be going up against DJ Reed for the majority of the game because most of the time he's lining up on the left side of the field. But when he does line up on the right side, he's going up against Sauce. And I know there's been a lot of talk, right, over Sauce Gardner, and he's fell off, and he's not this top guy. Listen, week 1, Sauce allowed 59 yards. Weeks 2, 3, and 4, he hasn't allowed more than 34. DJ Reed, basically the same thing. He allowed 58 yards week 1, hasn't allowed more than 33 yards in a game. These two remain the best corner duo in the NFL. Michael Carter is one of the most underrated nickel corners in the NFL, too. He's going to be lined up against Jerry Jeudy. If there's someone to take advantage of, it's going to be Michael Carter, but he does a great job in his own right. The Broncos offense, while the numbers are great, Russell Wilson is putting up top 10 quarterback numbers. This is the first time they're going up against an elite defense. They played Miami. They played the Raiders in Washington and Chicago. They played very beatable defenses. This is going to be their first true test to see if Sean Payton and Russell Wilson really are this good. Is Russell Wilson really playing at a top 10 level, or are they just going up against favorable defenses? I'm not going to sit here and disrespect Russ. I think he's done great. I think he's much improved from what he was last year. He looks more mobile, more explosive, more velocity on his balls. But Courtland Sutton this week going up against this cornerback duo in a game that's probably going to be low scoring. I'm not expecting a ton of touchdowns in this game. It's probably going to be low scoring because Zach Wilson, even though I'm hoping and praying he's going to continue on what he did against KC, I can't sit here and guarantee you that. And just like Zach, well, I shouldn't say just like Zach because Russell Wilson clears, but Russell Wilson in his own right hasn't shown me that he's a bona fide superstar back, that he's able to put up 30 points against an elite defense. So I'm sitting Courtland Sutton this week.
Yeah, we have a pretty cool tool over at FTN Fantasy, which it's our advanced DVP. So it shows how many fantasy points, targets, receptions per game teams allow to receivers that line up on the left side of the formation in the slot on the right. And the Jets to receivers on the left side of the formation, they're allowing 6.5 fantasy points per game. It's like bottom 5 in the league, and that's where Sutton plays like 45% of the time. So Sutton was definitely mine too. I'll say kind of like a very... We'll have to see practice reports going into the weekend, but I would be really hesitant to start Deebo Samuel just because he was clearly a decoy last week, and Kyle Shanahan said he's still not 100%. That scares me. The matchup's already tough in itself against Dallas. Dallas is like top 10 in terms of, or bottom 10, however you want to look at it, in terms of limiting yards after the catch. We know that's how Deebo really, really makes an impact. And I'm just worried that he's going to be, because they're deep enough to be able to throw out Deebo Samuel on the game or into the game and be a decoy, right? Like it won't. It's not like a team that only has one, maybe two viable pass catching options. Limiting Deebo as a decoy. They still have Kittle. They still have Ayuk. They still have the best running back in the league. So, like for me, unless like if you have like Nico Collins or something, I'm definitely starting him. But like unless you're otherwise, like if you're just looking at players off the waiver wire, like I would probably still start Deebo and pray that he's playing more. But the snaps were actually pretty high. It's just he was clearly like out there just to kind of get cardio and attract the defense. But I want to see practice reports because I'm a little bit worried about that.
Let me ask you this week. Honestly, this just because it's the first name that came to my mind: a Christian Kirk or a Deebo Samuel?
Zay Jones is probably going to play this week. Kirk's snaps have not been as favorable when Jones has played
which is ridiculous.
It's just because Kirk doesn't play in two wide sets. But
yep,
I might go Kirk honestly. Like I feel
he's
like
been pretty damn consistent.
I feel like his floor is like 6 for 70 most weeks, 6 for 65, and like Deebo's obviously like maybe if you're like a massive underdog in your matchup and you need a massive ceiling. Because like if Deebo is not a decoy, like it's not even a conversation. But like I think there's a legitimate chance he's still not 100%. So I guess it depends on your matchup. But right now I'd probably lean Kirk.
Okay. Let's get into the tight end starts and sits. Adam, we'll start with you. Now, we always like to do this, of course, because the tight end position, it's such a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get. I'm okay to come down to one consensus that's obviously not Mr. Tight End number 1, Sam Laporta. You start him every single week. That's my brother in Christ. I hope he's doing well. That's obviously going to be a huge play regardless of the matchup. But they are going up against Carolina. He will probably have a solid game. But I wrote in the doc, Joel. I didn't get a text from you, so I'm assuming that you're starting to fade him, unfortunately. Are we giving one
Oh.
last chance? One last chance to Darren Waller. Is this it?
I didn't
Is
know. I
this
didn't know where you were going because the position's so bad. I thought you were going Kyle Pitts, honestly, but
No,
you
Kyle
could
Pitts is a sit
you
every
could
week.
you could have gone Goddard. You could have
Kyle
gone
Pitts
Waller.
is
You
the
could have
No,
gone
lock.
Pitts.
No,
Sit.
so it's a strong fantasy reaction, consistent joke, but not really a joke at all. It's actually pretty serious about how
It's a
our
sad
tight ends
joke.
sit every single week is Kyle Pitts. Me and Joel mutually agree that that's always our sit.
Maybe you should start calling out to sit Jonnu Smith, and then Pitts will go off.
No. Actually, Jonnu Smith's going to be a start of the week just because
Start of the
they
week,
target the
Jonnu.
tight end almost. What did you tell me, Joel? They target the tight end more than
the
anybody
most,
else.
No one targets the tight end more than the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, it's like
It's gross.
35%. It's insane.
So yeah, I think this is it. This might just be the last week that we have trusting Darren Waller going up against the Dolphins, who right now
Yeah,
rank 24th
I
in terms of
guess.
points given up to the tight end position, have given up 2 touchdowns early in the season to the tight end, to Donald Parham and to Hunter Henry. I think
Yeah,
this
you
might
probably
just
have
be
to.
it. It might just be it,
Yeah.
right? Like, are we
There's
giving
just
any
not
more
like
chances after this?
because when we're doing like we put together show doc, I'm looking at tight ends, bro. I'm looking through this list and I'm like, well, obviously you start Kelsey, obviously you start Laporta, obviously you start TJ Hawkinson. I'm going through, I'm like, damn, bro, I don't want to start any of these other tight ends. The name I have here in a PPR league is Zach Ertz. 3 out of 4 weeks with 8 or more targets, 3 out of 4 weeks with 6 or more receptions. So if you're in a full PPR league, I think that's fine. He's just not explosive, right? He's averaging less than 10 yards per reception. But outside of that, I mean, I went through all of these tight ends and I'm like, I'm not excited about any of these guys. So Darren Waller is like one of the very few that has legitimate upside if he's able to get the targets and the Giants aren't getting sacked in 2 seconds. So, I doubt you're going to have a better option than Darren Waller on your team unless you picked up Sam Laporta.
Quick question before you go, Adam. Did you see that Jake Elliott is actually outscoring every single tight end so far this season?
That's hilarious. He's the kicker 1 so far?
I'm just going to assume so, but he has 1 more fantasy point than TJ Hawkinson.
I'm crying. Let's see. Jake Elliott is the kicker 1 on the year. 14, 10, 10, and 15. He's been elite.
He's been special, man.
Do you have a start of the week elite?
Let's hear it. Adam, listen, we're willing to let you in on a Darren Waller if you want to. We can live and die on this ship together. But if you have another play, listen, Jake Ferguson, I got to say, you put me on.
That was a great call.
You put me on because I have him in multiple leagues.
Yeah, he still leads, I believe, the NFL in targets inside the 10. It's either him or Adams. No, it's actually him. It's him, Jacoby Myers, and Adams lead the NFL in targets inside the 10.
It's just this week he's going up against the Niners. Right now they rank 8th in terms of points allowed to the tight end. It's Fred Warner also. So
I
love.
Ertz was on my list, so you can blame Dehls for me going to the Bills here. I think this might be the week for Dalton Kincaid. The route participation, the route participation went more towards him this past weekend. It was a season high in route participation. It was like 70-something%. He ran, I think, 9 more routes than Dawson Knox. Knox was limited in practice last week, and he's limited again this week. Maybe that's why. But also, I just think the Bills right now, they're playing the way they should play. It's layups for Josh Allen, forcing teams to finally move up in coverage, and then Josh takes shots over the top. We saw that a little bit last week. Kincaid was second on the team in targets last week with 5, behind obviously Stephon Diggs. The problem is Josh didn't have to throw the ball that much. But like Jacksonville, they're bottom 5 in most metrics against tight ends. Again, like it's a slow start. The Bills have a lot of talent. They're utilizing pretty much everybody. They're also running the ball better than they've probably ever had since Josh Allen's been there. But I think as a first-round player, they drafted him. I think the downfield targets will start to get there. But right now, they kind of want him. And again, the problem, too, is he's not actually playing like the full slot role like we expected. Like he's playing in the slot, but he's not actually playing slot receiver like a lot of people thought. But I think this could be the week. Like I would have probably talked about Cole Kmet if that game wasn't tonight, obviously. Hunter Henry is up there as well. Like I feel like you're almost have to start like Hunter Henry and Ertz at this point because the tight end position's so bad and players like Pitts and Goddard have been so underwhelming. But I think taking my my homer out of it, I think this could be the breakout game for Dalton Kincaid.
Kincaid, he's been one of those that we've been waiting on. We know that it's inevitable. You use a pretty high draft pick on him. It's just a matter of getting him comfortable into this offense. But a solid matchup against a secondary that has been very forgiving. Jaguars are
just gave up 95 to Jonnu Smith last week.
And Jonnu Smith, who we all understand is not even the best tight end on his team.
Should we phrase it? They gave up 95 to Jonnu Smith, or they gave up over 100 combined from Jonnu and Kyle Pitts.
Any way you shape it, it's just not going to bode well for Kyle Pitts. It's just the unfortunate truth. But a sit for me, like I mentioned earlier, how you put me on to Jake Ferguson. Unfortunately, he's going to have to find the pine this week. Going up against the Niners, never an ideal matchup. I feel as if still the Cowboys will win this game, but taking out real football, just going off just raw numbers. Again, Fred Warner has just essentially shut down the tight end, only allowed one touchdown. Not just Fred, of course, the Niners. And that was the Freiermuth opening weekend. 12 yards, 28 yards, and 58 yards to Arizona. They're shutting down the tight end regardless.
That Arizona game was so fluky, too. Ertz had 5 of his targets in the final drive of an absolute blowout, and he got like 4 of his catches in that last drive. So even that was like way fluky. They've been even more dominant.
There you go. Adam adding context to an even more dominant run from the 49ers. Ferguson, who's been really solid to start this season, especially in a tight end landscape that's so poor. Unfortunately, this is just nowhere near the matchup for him. Joel, before we get into our injuries, let's just go over teams that have buys. If you guys have any players on the Chargers, the Browns, the Seahawks, and the Bucks, that means guys like Keenan Allen. That means, of course, Justin Herbert, Deshaun, Amari, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. If you unfortunately have to start Rachaad White, if you unfortunately have to start Baker Mayfield.
Don't have to start Joshua Kelly again, that's for sure.
There you go. Because, of course, when the bye week's over, finally Eckler's back. But no DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett. If you're still rostering JSN, get him out of your lineup. Of course, Geno Smith in 2 quarterback leagues. And honestly, in 1 quarterback leagues, outside of last week, he's been pretty solid. Hopefully that knee's all right. This bye came at a perfect time for them. And of course, Jerome Ford. I've been having difficulty with my R's today for some reason. But Joel, if you want to get into the injuries, we could wrap this one up.
Yeah. So we had a few injuries. A couple of these guys are on bye, like Justin Herbert, for example, who got banged up, ended up coming back into the game. There was like a splint on his finger. He won't be playing this upcoming week, but something to monitor going forward. Kenny Pickett had a pretty nasty injury that seemed like it could have been serious, but it seems like he's good to go. I think the plan is for him to actually play. Seems like it's just a knee sprain. Thankfully, when that play happened, we're thinking the worst, right? Especially after, they were getting blown out. You're like, this is the worst thing that could happen. But thankfully, it's just a left knee sprain for him. Matt Stafford's another player who you mentioned earlier, Drew, got hurt during the game, was able to come back in. I don't know how he's able to do it. He gets banged up, it seems like, every single season, every single week, and he comes back in and he's fine. So I think the plan for him is, again, to play, so no worry there. Javonte Williams is one that it seems like he might miss. He does have a hip injury. Of course, he's coming off the ACL injury from last season. He does have a hip flexor strain is what it sounds like. It seems unlikely right now. I don't have practice reports in front of me, but it seems unlikely that
he did practice. I was going to say I did say he practiced.
That's a great sign.
The initial report, like after the game Sunday, was that Javonte thought he wasn't going to miss any time. So we'll see. The Jaleel McLaughlin, it might be
already before it even started.
I'm here for Jaleel.
I think he's going to get work, by the way.
Hell yeah, Jaleel is definitely useful in the pass game. And Russ has been prone, since being a Bronco, to throwing to the running back.
Moving on here, though, T. Higgins, we know he has a rib injury. He's expected to miss multiple weeks. He hasn't practiced yet this week. Not expecting him to play this upcoming week, and it's possible he misses beyond that. Devontae Adams sounds like he had a right AC sprain. He ended up coming back into the game, but he didn't do a ton once he re-entered the game. He got hurt, I want to say around the second quarter, came back, but really didn't get targeted a ton by Aiden O'Connell, except for like 1 or 2 drives towards the end of the game. He's another person we're just going to look at practice reports I'm not sure if he practiced Thursday, but Friday is going to be, the big test. Mike Evans had an injury as well. He does have a bye week this upcoming week, so something we'll have to monitor another week from now. That's mostly the big ones. Pat Fryermuth is going to be missing a couple of weeks. He has a hamstring strain. Amon-Ra is banged up, but it sounds like he's going to play. He was talking to reporters after practice today and said he feels pretty good. He was practicing on the sideline. The report was that he was practicing, he was heavily practicing on this rehab area. I don't know. It's very oddly worded.
Nobody really knows. Report. They said abdomen, but nobody actually knows what it is. It's very weird.
Yeah.
Dan Campbell sounded really non-committal about him playing. I think he's legitimately questionable, but if he practices tomorrow, then obviously looks a lot more likely he plays.
Yeah, that was most of the big injuries. Jimmy G is still going through concussion protocol. It sounds like he's going to play, but that's another one. He plays on Monday night, so ideally you have another option out there. But I think for the most part, that's about everybody.
All right. Hopefully, they if you are an Amon-Ra owner, not an ideal situation, especially with the uncertainty that is back-to-back, no practices. But again, like Joel just mentioned, heavily practicing on the sideline, very weirdly worded information. But you still have to, if he even goes into the game and he's playing in any regard, you have no choice. You have to fire Amon-Ra. He's simply been too great, too consistent for the majority, for the first 4 weeks of the season, I should say. Again, you have no choice. You have to play him.
Yeah, Saquon's another one that we should mention quickly, who limited the last 2 days in practice, but back-to-back practices. If he practices again on Friday, I feel pretty comfortable with him.
Okay, and that's going to do it for this Thursday night episode 10 of the Fantasy Reaction. Adam, thank you very much for joining us once again. It's seeming as if we can make this a reoccurring event. But Adam, of course, is there anything that you would like to shout out before you go?
Yeah, appreciate it. It's always fun chatting with you guys. Yeah, if you looking for some fantasy football, fantasy basketball starting up, I do a lot of fantasy basketball content, which I'm super excited about. ftnfantasy.com. Also, if you are really into DVOA, which is how a lot of people who follow football kind of track, how some of the best teams look defensively, offensively. We are now the home of Aaron Schatz's DVOA metrics, which is really exciting. So that's available at our site. Whether you play season-long fantasy, daily fantasy, sports betting, all that great stuff is over at FTN Fantasy, FTN Daily, and FTN Bets. And yeah, I'm super pumped for basketball. Always forget. Right around when media day starts, you kind of look and I see, not only is it about to be basketball season, but I got to do content for it too, which I love. But it's I think preseason starts this week, right?
I think there's games today. Yeah.
There you go. See, I'm so deep into football, I completely overlooked.
Which is understandable. This is prime football season, but fantasy basketball is honestly one of my, of course, fantasy football is number one alone by itself in the Hall of Fame. But fantasy basketball is one of the more enjoyable fantasy sports as well. I mean, the only two sports I do play, I used to show some love to fantasy baseball, but it's too long.
I can't do it.
It drags. But fantasy basketball, it's funny. Our draft's coming up. We're actually having a party for it. That's just how much we enjoy it. But Adam, we appreciate your time. But again, we appreciate you guys tuning in. If you stuck around this long, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are not subscribed. We're going to be back every Monday, every Thursday night to recap the game. And of course, go over studs and duds on Monday, starts of the week on Thursday. But that's going to do it from us. Take care, and we'll talk to you guys next time.